Pedaling then, it's something more often than not that we take for granted. I mean, how often do you just hop on your bike and off your trot for a spin without really thinking about what you're actually doing? I mean, the pros make it look so easy, just powering around, standing up, sitting down, they can pedal all day long. Well, today, we're gonna be looking at how to pedal like a pro. Now, before we even spin a crank, let's take a look at bike setup, because that's going to play a huge role in just how efficiently and comfortably we are going to be pedaling all day in the saddle. First up, we're going to talk seat height. Now, whatever bike you're on, XC bike, trail bike, big old enduro bike like this, you need to get this spot on, as it can help avoid a lot of discomfort like crunched up knees or overstretch, so hip damage, and make a huge difference, like I said, to your day in the saddle. So what is the perfect seat height? Well, that's down to preference and your leg length, of course, but a general way of finding out, or a rule of thumb, is that first up, your leg should never be locked out when your pedal is at the lowest position. Your leg should never be in a straight line. A really good way of setting this up is that if you unclip, or if you're on flats, just take your foot off, put the crank in line with your leg, and your heel should just about sit nicely on the pedal. So now if I take my foot off, unclip, where are we? There we go. You can see I've got that nice slight bend in my leg, and I'm never overstretched when I back pedal. If your saddle is too high, well then you're going to be perched on top of your saddle, and each time you stretch down to pedal, you're going to be rocking on your hips. That's going to be really uncomfortable and give you saddle sores and really damage your hips. Like I said, also if it's too low, then your knees are going to be very crunched up, and again, put a lot of pressure, which you don't want, on your joints, so your knee joints, your hip joint here, because you're going to need so much more force to extend your leg and pedal. So now let's talk saddle tilt. Now that is how far up or down the front end is, or like if the angle of the saddle, if you like. Now this, again, you want to do when the saddle's up, because that's where it's going to make the most difference. Having the saddle pointing too high up at the front, well, that's going to put a lot of pressure, let's just say, where you don't want it. If it's pointing too far down, well, you're going to be sliding off the front of that saddle, especially when it's wet and muddy. Like I said, once it's up there, play around with all of these dimensions, so where it sits on the rails, and then once you do feel like you've got everything dialed in, really play with the tilt. On a lot of saddles nowadays as well, you can really fine-tune that angle to get it absolutely spot on. The pedaling motion itself can be a fluid and gracious movement, maximizing energy and power. Done wrong, however, and it can be an uncomfortable and wasteful experience. In this little part, we're going to be talking about spinning circles, not pistons. Spinning circles, not pistons, basically is a good way of reminding yourself that you should try to carry a nice, smooth motion for the entire revolution of the crank, not just stabbing down on the pedals from the 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock position. As you pedal, press down on the pedals on the downward stroke, and once it gets to the bottom of the cycle, let it smoothly follow around as you lay down the power on the other crank. If clipped in, try not to pull up on the cranks, allowing your trailing foot to naturally follow around and come up smoothly, ready to repeat. When out riding, settle into a nice steady cadence, focusing on keeping things smooth and even throughout. The more you practice this, the easier it'll come to you. Much like the age-old discussions of skiers versus snowboarders, football or rugby, flats versus clips is always going to be a hot topic in the mountain bike world, and which you should use. There's a reason a large majority of pros do use clipless pedals. I mean, those guys are hard chargers, and the courses that they ride aren't exactly the smoothest. So riding a clipless pedal helps your feet stay in place when the going gets rough. Now, most pros, again, would argue that with a clipless pedal, you can get more power down through the cranks and more drive. When setting up your clips, this can be a really personal choice, but the rule of thumb I'll generally go for is to stand normally on the ground and look at the angle my feet point at. From there, I'll angle the cleat to just point inside of my big toe. Then for me, I'll have it so it just sits on the ball of my foot as well for maximum force when pushing down. Now remember, this is an entirely personal setup, and there is no golden rule on how it should be done. Everyone's different, and therefore everyone will have their cleats in a certain position or slightly differently. If you're lucky enough, put your bike in a turbo, or at least your pedals on a bike in a turbo, and that way you can pedal and actually try them out how they feel, making sure the front to back and the angle is spot on and just how you like it when you pedal exactly. If you haven't got a turbo or rollers or something like that, then at least lean your bike up against something and you can try it back pedaling. Not quite the same, I know, but it still gets a good feel for how those cleats are set up. Ole! Now, when it comes to flat pedals then, having a good shoe and pedal combo is going to be really crucial here because you're not attached. So something that's going to work together really well is worth experimenting with. Different pedals, different shoes. Now, manufacturers out there will do different size pedals. So if you've got big feet, little feet, you can choose exactly what works for you. The same with the rubber on the bottom of your shoe, something that's going to be nice and grippy and really dig into those pins so that, well, that ain't slipping around nowhere. You'll also find actually when pedaling that rather than being on the ball of your foot like you would be with a clip, the flat pedal is going to sit more towards the center of the pedal. So therefore you might actually have to change your seat height a bit for that. There will no doubt come a time when you're going to need to lay down a little bit more horsepower, be it going up a steep climb or coming out of a tight turn. Now, should this happen, well then pros here will often stand up out the pedals to really get the power down through the cranks quicker. But wait, there's still a technique to this. You don't just go at it all guns blazing, mashing the pedals like there's no tomorrow. Still try and follow that basic smooth pedaling technique of as one foot goes through, the other one follows through nice and smoothly. So you're constantly still putting power on the cranks. Obviously this time you're just going to be standing up. What you will find here though is that as you are standing up, the bike is naturally going to move from side to side as your body weight does also. As you move your body and swing the bike, you'll do that because you'll get more force going down through the pedals. Do try to keep this under control. They're keeping a strong core and strong upper body so you're not just swinging the bike around and just losing more energy there. You're still being as efficient as possible. So as you move the bike one way, you force the pedal down for maximum power, and then you switch that back to the other side. You're not just swinging the bars around, going crazy for it. So there you have it then, how to pedal like a pro in a nutshell. All the tips you could need, hopefully. I hope you have some good fun practicing this when you're out on the trail next. I'm out on the trail, so I'm actually gonna go for a pedal now. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you later.